Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank, coming to you virtually from Seattle, the PNW, or as we call the Pacific Northwest. And today we're north of the border again. If you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here is the podcast of choice, the podcast for you. This is where street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today, back-to-back weeks, Phil Simchich, coming to us from north of the border where we're still open. The border is still open that way. Our guest today is Caroline Smith, CEO of Dataworks Consulting, a managed service provider for IT. We are going to be very excited to learn more about how to be more efficient and secure in your technology. Welcome, Caroline. We will be with you in just a minute. Listen, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and yes, YouTube as well. You might say we are ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, including the mothership in Atlanta, Boston, Boca Raton, Charleston, South Carolina, a lot of great places. Now, before we bring on Caroline to learn more about her and her great company, hello there, Phil.
Hello there, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, Phil, I don't know if you watch the Summer Olympics at all. I know that you're a hockey guy up north and probably watch the winter, but you may know the Summer Olympics are underway, and it's crazy because I can't even imagine how they're still running it with COVID and the Delta variant, and Tokyo seems to be a petri dish for that, but that's beside the point. I don't know if you're watching, but did you happen to see that Simone Biles, our famed United States gymnast, bowed out today?
Yes, absolutely, and applaud her for that. As we all know, life happens in the 6-inch space between our ears, and as we'll hear from Caroline about cybersecurity, I think we all need to pay better and close attention to our mental security.
Well, and I agree with you. I'm a big Simone Biles fan, and I think in her press conference, which I watched, she was very clear about. I don't even think we can even judge the pressure she's carrying, not only just for herself and her teammates, but for the country. And to walk away from what probably would have been her last Olympics takes a tremendous amount of courage. And Phil, I've been watching. I follow a lot of golf, and recently, a number of named golfers have also cited, some mental health challenges they've been facing. But I want you to share a little bit in what your thoughts are, because this isn't just about athletics and celebrities and things like that. In our workplaces, especially on the heels of what we've been under with the pandemic, mental health, stress, anxiety, that's a real business issue too, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And for years, whenever I've started with a new client, I'm trying to assess their level of stress, because if they're coming to me from a banker referral, it's usually because the banker said no, and that's caused a little bit of stress. And then we start rebuilding up from there. But it's really interesting to see like the media's positive take on Simone's situation finally, because both your dad and my dad were World War II veterans, and my dad suffered PTSD all his life. Couldn't sit in front of an open window, right? Wow. And right now I'm coaching a military veteran with PTSD. And so even today, the government support, the social support, the public support, it's definitely lacking for what's needed. And then to your question, being a business owner and a leader and responsible for other employees and their livelihoods carries a heck of a lot of pressure. So it's really a sign of strength to ask for help. And I saw a quote from Robin Williams the other day that be kind to everyone because you don't know what they're going through.
Right.
And so life is hard. So if we assume that life is hard for the person we're talking to, we can tend to be a little bit more compassionate and kind and then figure out what's going on. So yeah, we all have a role, whatever that is in our businesses, to help other business owners really open up and feel that we're in this together. Life's a team sport.
You know what? I like that. Life's a team sport. I love that. Man, I might steal it from. No, I'd never steal it from you, Phil. That's a great point. Now, listen. You know what else can cause a lot of mental stress and anxiety for business owners and their employees is technology. And you know, Caroline, I got to ask you. I'm going to bring you into this situation. You don't have to share about what you think about Simone Biles unless you want to. But what I'd like to know from you is in your work with business owners that you obviously work with small and medium-sized business owners. There are probably some higher levels of stress and anxiety that come from technology. What are those? Why is that? What are you seeing? And then how do you help?
Yes, Dan, that's a great question. I would say a lot of times with the business owners, anything with a button that turns on and off can cause a lot of stress for business owners. And everyone wants their technology to work. They don't want to wait on it. They want it to work, and they want it to work right and immediately. And then add cybersecurity on top of that. That can cause business owners to have a lot of stress, sleepless nights, to making sure that their data is protected and that tomorrow they can come into business. They can have their employees working and not just hanging out the water cooler because of technology issues, and that they can turn a profit with those things in place.
So, Phil, before you ask your question, you just made me think of something, Caroline. I remember the days back in the 90s with the dial-up, and
Yep.
I remember how cool I thought it was back then that I could actually phone in and dial up the internet, and it was exciting to hear the dial-up, and you'd wait, 10, 15 seconds, maybe more, and then something fuzzy would come. Today, people would go we'd go out of our minds with that. Think of how much has changed.
I know, yeah. And especially we would be sitting at our house doing it, right? And now we expect that no matter where we're at, in our car, on a ferry, wherever we're at, we expect that instant connection to the world.
So, Caroline, over the last year or so, a lot of people have been working from home. And my wife, the chiropractor, who's opening a new clinic, so crownchiro.ca, if I may plug that. But she's seeing a lot of patients because they're working at the kitchen table, terrible ergonomics and things like that. What are you seeing as the most common tech problems from working from home?
I think a lot that we saw, especially when the kids were in school, was shared bandwidth, right? It was slow. Or the kids were watching YouTube and mom and dad were needing to do a conference call. So we were getting a lot of questions about, hey, how my internet's slow. What is it? And it's really taking a look at how those connections were happening, right? I can't get to work, or, hey, this is for school. I'm really not just watching Roadblocks all day.
So, you know what? Some people listening to this, and I know, and before I met you, I'm not sure I knew. So maybe we should define exactly what a managed service provider is on the IT side. Tell us exactly what Dataworks does.
So Dataworks provides outsourced technical support to small businesses. So a lot of small companies just do not have the need for a full-time person sitting around waiting for something to happen. So what Dataworks does is we become that outsourced tech partner for small businesses. So we manage a lot of networks for small businesses and really taking a proactive approach of that as well. So we're not here. We don't want to be here to call up and say, hey, my computer's broken, which we do a lot of that. But we're trying to really prevent those problems from happening. So we take a look at different tools that we can use to assist us with this. And a lot of monitoring to make sure your hard drive's not full, filling up. Even with our cybersecurity tools as well, we'll get notifications if something's happening. And then we can give you a call. Hey, something's going on here. We really need to take a look at it. So we really become that help desk person on the other line. So our clients call us because, hey, my mouse isn't working, all the way to let's design a new network. We're moving.
The prevention side is very interesting. So what do you see with the constant proliferation of new technology and software and apps and all sorts of things? what are some simple things that business owners can do just to prevent the confusion and hopefully have their systems working in harmony?
Right. It's definitely a layered approach. I wish I had that silver bullet to hand everyone and say, "Hey, this is the one tool you need, and everything's going to be great." It's not that easy. First of all, we got to start with a good antivirus and something that's monitoring and those pieces of it as well. Then we can take a look at firewalls, and that's really the firewall is going to be the door to prevent stuff from coming in to your network. And, and those are technical tools. That's something that anyone can put into place, any level. But I think the part that we need to remember is the people part of it, and getting your employees and staff trained to be able to start recognizing phishing emails. So they don't click on something. They can say, "Hey, let's step back. Should I really, really, send that money to the prince in Nigeria?" Right? So I think those are the things, is that really taking a look at those layers that are to prevent cyber attacks.
So that has a lot of parallels to what we're all going through right now. The antivirus, get your COVID vaccine, right? Prevent that. And then in terms of firewalls and monitoring our own mental health, like Simone is doing, and communicating and getting expert help as needed. Okay, Dan, over to you.
So you and I, Caroline, were on a webinar. You and I were panelists recently talking about fraud. And when you brought up phishing and the Nigerian prince, it caught my attention, because let's talk about it, because that one, I think we all get. But you know what really happens on the human end is don't switch bank accounts for a vendor just because you got an email from them without checking, because that we're seeing more and more phishing attempts, or whatever we're going to call it, where fraud is being perpetrated. Nobody has to go in and say stick them up anymore with a mask over their face. Number one, you're expected now to walk into a bank with a mask, not the opposite way. But nobody's doing that. They're sitting somewhere and creating really elaborate email duplications as an imposter. So, when we're talking about those simple things, and in a virtual world now where you may have a lot of those functions working from home, what are some ideas on education for employees?
Well, first of all, especially, give employees those examples about not changing bank accounts for auto payment. And I would even go to the point, don't even call the phone number that's on the email address. Really look into your CRM or wherever you keep the data of those contacts, and call that number, because that can even be a fraudulent number as well. So that would be part of the training that we do, security assessment training. Run people through phishing attempts quarterly. See how they do. What are they clicking on? And then from there, train them and go through what does something look like. If you're not sure, I would rather have someone call Dataworks up and say, "You know what, this email doesn't look right. Can you take a look at it for me?" And we can take a look at the headers and kind of take a look and see where the emails was originated from. Or better yet, just kind of go old school and pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I got this email from you. Is this legit?" So I think this is the part with some of the technology, is that we really do sometimes just need to pick up the phone and not just hit reply to emails.
Phil, I'm going to let you take one in before we go to commercial.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Dan. So in terms of everything's on mobile devices these days, what are the unique challenges, or what are the different things that people need to do to make sure they can still transact and communicate with their employees and their customers and their suppliers, while still being like really easy to use in terms of everybody's mobile devices?
I think the first part you need to take a look at is who owns that mobile device, and have a very good, if your employee owns it, you need to have a pretty good BYOD, bring your own device policy to work, and have the expectations in what happens when that employee leaves. Where's the employee data stored? Where's the company data stored? Where's the employee data stored? Because some of those BYOD policies say, hey, we can wipe your phone completely when you leave employment. Well, what if that's the only place you had your kids' birthday pictures, right? And those pictures are gone. So I think really taking a look at who owns the devices, and then also when the agreement with the employer terminate, or they lose their device or something, there are the correct expectations on both sides of what happens with that data.
That's really good advice, considering I've lost one phone in the lake and driven over another one with my BMW. So all of those apply. Thanks.
Now there's the human engineering part that we were talking about. Hey, listen, it's time for us to pay some bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with our guest, Caroline Smith, for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to find out if cyber insurance is a good idea. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Would you like to grow your business, increase revenues, and raise profits? Would more financing from your banker help you grow? Who is guiding your succession plan? Would you like more control over your business so you can sleep better at night? SME Business Wealth Builder works with the business leaders and owners like you to help them grow their business and build their business wealth. For more information and to check out free resources, go to smewealthbuilder.com.
All right, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Phil Simchich, today's co-host, and our guest today is Caroline Smith with Dataworks Consulting. And for our next segment, Hot or Not.
And Caroline, I know you're a regular listener of the podcast. You know that Hot or Not is where Phil and I pepper you with questions about business, about technology, maybe even throw in a few fun things. Asked about, by the way, just in case you were wondering, at the end you went absolutely nothing. Cyber insurance, and I know I'm teeing up kind of an easy one because we were on that webinar together, but you're in this the technology security business. Hot or not, cyber liability insurance?
Hot. Get it. It can save your bacon. So yes, we actually recommend all of our clients have it. Your data is your livelihood in business. And to be able to have that, the insurance there, if something would happen, to help restore it is key on it as well.
As a technology expert and a parent, cell phones for kids, hot or not?
I have struggled with this one, and I chose to give my kids cell phones when they hit 6th grade because I figured I still had some control and they still kind of listened to me at that point. So I could help guide them and learn good cyber security and cyber habits and phone habits. So that's the approach I took with doing a cell phone and internet plan as well.
So I'm not exactly sure how to put this into a hot or not, so I'm not even going to try. But, in the old days when everybody was working out of an office, right, I might be an employee working at my desk, yet I'm doing shopping, I'm posting on social media, I'm doing maybe a variety of different things on my cell phone, but I'm on the company Wi-Fi. And I'm not thinking about it all because I'm not doing it from my computer that's given to me by my employer. I'm doing it from my hip pocket, so to speak. What are some of the dangers to the company, to the employer, with whether it's employees or people who are in the waiting room, waiting to come in and using the Wi-Fi?
Well, we actually recommend having a guest Wi-Fi for that very reason, and even and having it completely segmented. Again, it's just another area that someone can get access. And at that point, we do not recommend that at all. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'm just gonna ask a quick follow up, so maybe you can put this all together, and then Phil will, I'm sure, has a question. So, transitioning from business, and that's a great idea on the business. I love that. People are also working out of their homes. They also have. I work from my home, but I have guests come into my home. Should we do the same, especially if we have a business? Should we do the same for home-based businesses?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Most routers can do both, many of that, your Comcast or your internet routers. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, note to self, add guest Wi-Fi after this call. Thanks, Caroline.
Yeah, Phil, I've already noted that for myself too.
Yeah, really, it's like, all right, and another important thing, we'll get that done. Further to Dan's question, and pre-COVID, when we used to travel in airports and hotels and things like that, what are do's and don'ts for airport Wi-Fi, hotel Wi-Fi?
I think it depends on what you're accessing on it. If you're accessing company data on that, make sure you have a VPN connection in. It gives me cringies of that type of stuff as well, because again, you're unaware of the security that's in place on that side of it as well. And I think there's a balance. You still have to work a lot of times when you're traveling as well. So your IT company needs to probably take a good look at what kind of connections are allowed to your systems.
So my next hot or not kind of revolves around maybe that small business owner who has less than 10 employees, and they're always watching, as they should, their expenses and what they're paying for, and might say, I've got 6-7 employees. I'm going to do a little DIY tech support. We're going to do a do-it-yourself version. So hot or not, DIY tech support for really small businesses.
Not. And even if your brother-in-law works for Microsoft, we've cleaned up a lot of networks on that case of it. And again, it's just taking a look at best practices and to keep your business safe.
That's awesome. So I know lots of people who try and do things themselves, and they're not experts in that. And so they're doing technical work that's just going to cause them problems. And if they were, and so especially with small and medium firms where sometimes it's the majority shareholder or the owner getting themselves in trouble, you'd never be allowed to do that in a big company. So very interesting. Speaking of big companies, what's your preference, Microsoft or Apple?
I would say for an operating system that I use on a day-to-day business to run my business, Microsoft all the way. But I do have an Apple phone, and I love that piece of it as well.
Awesome. So you tell a story. By the way, I think Phil and I are I know we're Apple guys as well. We've got the Apple Watch and the iPhone and the whole thing going. But you told a great story in the webinar we were in. I was going to try to put this in a hot or not, but I'm just going to ask you to share the story. You have a high-ranking executive in your C-suite, the CBO, who sent you an email recently or at some point asking for either some more money or to transfer his check somewhere else. And luckily it was caught, but it gave an example of how these these criminal experts can access information from employees. You want to talk about the CBO and Arlo?
Yes. So my CBO is my chief barking officer, or my golden doodle. He's 5 and is actually here at the office with me almost every day as well. And I, in my spam folder, received a request or an email from him that was a spoofed email from Arlo at dataworksconsulting.com asking me to, I believe it was to change where his direct deposits were going. And I was just, I wasn't quite sure. I didn't believe that one, that email would come in. And again, we talked about, it's the Nigerian prince or anything like that, but it could be, just the receptionist saying, hey, can you change where my, direct deposit's going? So got to be careful of where those emails are coming and who's sending them.
So just a quick follow-up. Internally, probably a best practice is those legitimate requests probably should literally be walked over to the accounting department, or a phone call made. Don't do it on email.
Correct. Absolutely. Or, there's a lot of services out there that the employees can manage it themselves. And then those are the ones I like. Then I don't have to get into that part of it either.
Yeah. So laptops tend to have a tough life as the coming and goings. Do you recommend upgrading or changing out your hardware laptop every 2 years, hot or not?
We do it every 3 years, usually, is what we recommend on it. In the past, it was easy to, swap out hard drives, add memory. Not so much anymore. They're pretty much single use. Get your 3 years in and get a new one.
Awesome. So I'm going to advise my chief operating officer that my 5-year-old MacBook's days are done. Thank you.
Yes.
Time for a new one. Time for a brand new one. And actually, it's funny that you say that, Phil. The MacBook that I'm looking at sitting on to the left of me over here, I think is past 5 years as well. So maybe that's due for an update as well. Caroline, what do you think the biggest mistake that CEOs are making in regards? Now, they're smart enough to hire you, and that's a good start. But just from what you've seen, what are some of the biggest mistakes that they're making because they're either doing or not doing when it comes to technology, health, and security?
I think that's a great question. I think the biggest one is, I'm not big enough. Why do they want my data? They don't take the risk seriously. I was reading the other day that 1 in 5 small businesses this year will experience some sort of cyber breach. And we're not talking major companies that are just vulnerable on this anymore. And to really do a good job at preventing it, it's like having a key, right? You have a door, and every time you go in that door, you're going to have to put that key in. With cybersecurity and different things we can do, like multi-factor authentication, there's going to be some pain in there. It's kind of a pain to have to log into your phone to log into your computer. And the CEO needs to really champion that for the company. So if the CEO is like, hey, this is what we're going to do, we want to keep everyone safe, and have a positive outlook on it, that's great. But if the CEO's taken, well, I don't want to do it, everyone else does, but not me type of attitude on it, then, they have to be a champion and a leader on it.
Yeah. And I'm just going to really follow up, and you just touched on that. I have, you've probably seen where the CEO says, yes, we're all going to do this, but they don't do it. They're not the first one or even the last one. They haven't done it yet. And that role modeling is important.
Yes.
Phil.
So I'll ask one more quick question before we go to break. And so computers sort of came about to automate a lot of tasks. And I think a lot of businesses are just stuck there. So they've got accounting and word processing on the computer. What can they do to really think more strategically in terms of using technology as an integrated part of their business at a much higher level? So, and I know we're talking small, medium businesses, but when we start looking at like ERP software where the systems start talking to themselves, what's your perspective on that?
I think the bigger pieces of that is what data is getting collected and how can we mine that data to make better business decisions on it. Taking a look at some of the business analytics part of it. And so we can, in the ERP systems, hey, can we find out these bottlenecks or where this is going wrong? And really, we're having a lot more ways to really dive deep in the data because we're gathering so much data. So I see that's where a lot of the innovation, I think, can come into place as well, is really examining what's happening and then taking a critical look at that and figuring out how we can become more efficient.
Yeah, I see that as a huge opportunity now for small and medium businesses because they're not too small for some level of ERP when you look at how many standalone systems they use. And even big companies, how much they use spreadsheets for critical accounting information. It's kind of scary.
Yes. And even with having stuff in spreadsheets, you're having data in a lot of different areas. And again, it's hard to combine all that to really take a look and make business decisions on that as well.
Well, we've got to make a quick business decision ourselves, and we're going to take our final short break to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back with Caroline Smith for our Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to put Caroline in Dr. Brown's DeLorean. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors: Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, and the Kitsap Sun newspaper. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders of the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm co-host Phil Simchich, and our guest today is Caroline Smith for our next segment, Plead the Fifth.
And Plead the Fifth. Caroline, you know this too. We're going to maybe turn up the heat just a little bit, ask some other questions. You get a chance to plead the fifth once and once only. And after that, we can ask really hard questions. But I just said we're going to put you in the DeLorean. We're going to send you back 10 years. Caroline, what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago?
Wow.
Or 2011. What advice?
Well, at 2011, I had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. So this too shall pass, I think, for my parenting, that the diapers and the sleepless nights will get over sooner rather than later on it. As for business on it, I would say just keep moving forward. And you just got to keep walking through it. And there's going to be a lot of hard times and nights that you want to give up. And the next morning, just keep that next step, keep walking forward.
So in the past, what past failure or mistake really taught you the most about business or life? What was that lesson?
I would say the biggest learning I always have is with employees. I feel that interactions with them has where my biggest growth has happened for that, and the conversations and where I was at, when I began my career 20 years ago and where I'm at now. It's just the patience that the people need. I don't have to have it my way all the time on it. And that I'm going to be probably the biggest bottleneck, and I just need to step away and let the employees take it. And I think that's probably the biggest one.
Well, you didn't just step away. You just stepped into my next hot or not question. And little did you know that. So plead the fifth, Caroline. If we asked your employees, what would be the one thing that you could improve on, that they'd like to see you do or stop doing, what would it be?
Wow.
I told you these were tough, Caroline.
I know they are tough. They are tough. I think a lot of it is having my fingers in it a little too much, to really step back and take a look and let them lead the charge on this, that I don't have to touch it all.
So we're going to move from stepping back to really starting up. What fears did you have when you first started your business, and how did you overcome them?
I think I was lucky in the fact that I was just doing it. So how it started by the business is my ex-husband and I started it, and it really started on the side. And it was kind of a side hustle. And I was just getting new clients. And at that time, I was doing database programming. I was writing code. And just slowly and surely just bringing one client in. So when it was time to really leave my full-time job, I was already working between both jobs 80 hours. So I was actually getting a bit of a break by just having one job. So I think maybe there was part of it, being young enough, didn't realize how big a step I was taking.
Awesome.
Yeah, that not knowing is always good. Now, speaking of not knowing, our intrepid producer, Barb, has no idea I'm going to ask her to come back in because she had sent us, she sent me a text in our little text toy conversation. She actually has a great question. I think she thought I was going to ask it. But Barb, would you just step in and ask Caroline your excellent question?
So Caroline, you mentioned that we should be updating our laptops every 2-3 years.
Yep.
What do we do with the old laptops and the data that's on them?
Well, first of all, get everything transferred over. Make sure it is all like you can access it. Everything's working right on it. And what we do for our clients is we bring them back here. We do a process called debanning, which basically takes a look at the hard drive and writes ones and zeros over every sector of that hard drive. Then from there, we'll take the hard drive physically out, and then we'll take it to a recycling place and then watch them crunch those drives. So that, first of all the data is securely erased, and then physically it's destroyed as well.
That must be fun watching it physically destroy. There's kind of a destruction mode. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like it would be fun. And so I have a quick plead the fifth here, Phil. I'm going to jump on the back here of Barb's great question because we've been asking this question. It's the same one we've been asking now of our guests for this year. So you may have heard us ask this. You got to start a new business, but you got to do it based on a hobby. What would that new business be? What hobby?
What hobby? Wow. I think where I would want to start a business, I would think I want to do a nonprofit and really work with coding and girls and really working on or robotics or something with girls and getting them into the technology field. I've done some robotics with the Girl Scouts. I've done some coding with my kids and some of their classes and that type of stuff as well. So really getting girls encouraged to code. At about 6th grade, girls in middle school, they just kind of lose interest. And I don't know if it's pressure from where it's coming from. But if we can keep girls kind of coding and get them in through the high school level and into college, there's going to be so many jobs in IT coming up, and especially in cybersecurity.
Very cool.
Awesome. If you had the opportunity to relive your career life, what would you do over or different?
Well, I don't think I would do anything. I think I'm one of those people. Once I hit high school, I got a TI-83 calculator, and I realized math was so much easier if I could code the problems. And I was allowed to use that calculator. I didn't have to memorize the quadratic equation. I programmed it in, and I fell in love with technology then at that point. So, and I continued it. My undergrad is in Bachelor's of Business Administration and Computer Science. So every day I'm really living what I was drawn to, but all those years ago.
One of the conversations you and I have had in the past, and I wanted to bring it up now, is that I had the mistaken notion that most small businesses, and I'll keep with small and move into mid, I guess, a little bit, but most small businesses used a managed service provider for their technology needs, and that's really not true. Talk about where you start with Dataworks, where you start from either a number of users or a revenue. Where do you start working with clients, and where should people listening to this start thinking about it if they own a business?
Yeah, I would say once you're starting to really start connecting people together and sharing data, that's when you really need to take a look at growth on that. So usually we jump into clients that are about 10 users at that point. prior to pandemic, they had an office, everyone had machines, they needed to, either go to the cloud, they had a server in their closet that they all had to get connected to. So I think that's the point where, hey, let's take a look at security on the internet connection coming in, how everyone can talk, internally. Now with the cloud, how we can get it, everyone continuing working that way as well. So I'd say right around that 10 users is kind of where companies really need to think about that. Or, you know what, they're just frustrated with technology and they don't want to deal with it, even if it's a 1 or 2 person business.
So you talked about the importance of data sharing and information sharing. What are some of the first level tools or solutions or ideas you have for companies that aren't effectively integrating and sharing their information right now to move into that much better world where they get better data so they can make better decisions?
I would say, for just the productivity standpoint, Office 365 does a great baseline job on that as well. You're really getting into using Teams and having those conversations. People are, millennials, and that they just want to send a quick text or chat, right? They don't want to, let's open the email up and let's type an email. So really, I think, taking a look at some of the collaborative tools, I would say definitely take a look at that Office 365 and anything that you can do to keep data together so you're not having spreadsheets all over the place. Because, really being able to, I think this comes from my background as a database person. The owner may say, hey, I want to take a look at the sales for this. Well, if it's in this spreadsheet here and that spreadsheet there, how are we going to combine them? So really, taking a look at CRMs for the sales side of it. Most people have their accounting in some sort of accounting software. And then also, some sort of line of business that your company can depend on so that then we can get data out and you can make great decisions.
Awesome. I look forward to the end of spreadsheets where people actually have information in one system. Caroline, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank. For our listeners that want to get in touch with you and learn more about your services and your company, how can they get more information?
They can go to our website at www.dataworksconsulting.com. There's a phone number there. We'll pick it up. Or they can send me an email at caroline@dataworksconsulting.com as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. Everyone, make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts, such as iHeart, Google, Apple, and Spotify. And I'm pretty sure they're all cyber secure. So please follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, speaking of Facebook, we're going to be back here again on Wednesday. Let me see. I guess that takes us to where? What day is that, Phil? August 4th. I knew I had it written somewhere. First of all, Caroline, thanks for being our guest. Phil, thanks for being here with us. Our next show will be on Wednesday, August 4th. It's a live stream on our Facebook page. Our guest will be Doug Peterson with Get Priorities Straight LLC. James Alberson is going to be my co-host for that. In the meantime, until we meet again, please be safe, be well, and be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.